This video was selected for release this month by my doll faces and pop tarts over on Patreon. Much love to you as always. Hello sunflowers, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to tackle a big topic and a very serious topic, which is the relationship between witchcraft and trauma and the journey of healing and coping and living with trauma after the fact. This is a really sort of like in-depth topic. I know I'm not going to get to cover everything that I would want to say and mean to say, but that is what the comments section is for, guys. Okay, so do your liking, do your subscribing, and please do your commenting, because this is a topic that has a lot of gravitas, a lot of weight, and it's so important for so many people. How can we access witchcraft as a tool to assist us when we're dealing with trauma? What are the dangers and the limitations? What are the best practices? Is witchcraft even a possible thing that you can put into the toolkit? Do people sort of over exaggerate how good witchcraft is at helping you with trauma? I know for me, I've spoken to a lot of people who have said that witchcraft was an utter lifeline for them in helping them to cope with the aftermath of something difficult and traumatic, and going on into, getting enough things into the toolkit to help with trauma. I know some people that credit witchcraft with saving their lives after trauma, and I am definitely in that group of people. So there is going to be a little bit of bias in this video. I guess I just need to say that right out of the gate, but I am going to be fair. There are dangers, there are limitations. I am going to talk about all of that. I am going to talk about best practices. And some people do come to me and say, that they hoped witchcraft would be more effective as a tool in their kit when dealing with trauma. And I want to speak to that as well to see if I can give you any upgrades, any hacks, any tips, anything of that nature coming from me, myself, just as a spiritual counselor, a witchcraft mentor. I'm a witchcraft author, and I've also been a witch myself, obviously, for many, many years now. So I'm going to try and do anything that I can to be of assistance around this very powerful and very deep topic today. It is true that you can use witchcraft to create the conditions to reflect upon what has happened to you, to get your tools into the kit to assist you when your trauma comes up in everyday life, and to help you with things like emotional processing, rebuilding self-trust, rebuilding self-concept, all that kind of stuff. There are practices and theories within witchcraft that can really give you the keys to your future and help you to envision something different for yourself post-trauma. But I'm not going to promise any quick fixes. I'm not going to do any spiritual bypassing, and I am going to get real. So if you are into that and that sounds like a piece of you, stick around, get comfortable, and let's get into this topic together. Okay, let's begin this discussion by getting on the same page together about trauma. So you've got two kinds of psychological trauma. You've got acute trauma, and that is trauma that comes from one singular isolated event. And then you've got complex trauma, and that usually is the result of prolonged, ongoing, repeated events, right? Events that continue in some kind of cycle. So acute trauma might come from some kind of accident that occurred. It might come from one very shocking thing that happens to you or that you witness, whereas complex trauma might come from something like an ongoing period of being abused or mistreated or neglected by your adult caregivers, right? So that's kind of the difference between them. When you're traumatized, something intense and distressing and painful and jarring has happened to you. And as a result of that, you get a series of psychological and physiological triggers and experiences and symptoms that arise, right? You can either be reminded out of nowhere about your trauma, or it can be something that you regularly end up getting into obsessive episodes around, and you kind of can't stop thinking about it, can't stop talking about it. Trauma really messes with our sense of safety. It messes with our sense of self. It switches on the body's survival mode. So even if you are in a completely safe space with totally safe people, even if you're having a good time, one thing can tap you into your trauma and the memories, and your body goes haywire. Your body thinks it is literally right back there. You have that emotional memory and physical memory. And so it can be incredibly disruptive. It can be very immersive. It can be scary, and it can have quite a burden sometimes on your ability to communicate, your ability to forge strong relationships. All kinds of things can happen when you're dealing with trauma that is going unchecked and is unhealed. You might feel powerless. You might feel disconnected from your physical body or from your wider life. You might feel that you lost your sense of meaning, your sense of purpose, or your sense of self because of what you went through. There can be emotional fragmentation. There can be literal physical symptoms like shortness of breath when you go through triggers around your trauma. So, all kinds of different things, and everybody's individual response to any trauma they suffered is going to be different. But I just wanted to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. I'm not talking about blunt force trauma. Okay, you need to see a doctor. Witchcraft is not going to help for that.
Compound fracture of the right radius, 2 fractured ribs, torn ligaments, strained tendons, numerous contusions, bruises, and scratches. What have you been doing?
You mean, what have we been doing?
But I'm talking about psychological trauma, how it materializes, and the effects it has on body and mind. And today we're going to talk about how witchcraft can assist you in dealing with that and finding the coping mechanisms for that and allowing yourself to have a flourishing life in spite of the fact that you carry trauma. I have worked with literally thousands of witches at this point in my career, and I feel so privileged to be able to say that. I've had so many conversations about this specific topic, and there is one thing probably that I would prize above anything else that would explain why so many people with trauma have found witchcraft to be helpful. And that is that witchcraft restores agency, because it is a practice that pretty much most of the time promotes agency. Okay, if you're doing witchcraft within a very, very strict tradition with a hierarchy and you're taking orders and all that kind of stuff, I can't really speak to that. But the kind of freewheeling, ungovernable, do-it-yourself witchcraft that I teach over here, that really is very, very much to do with agency at all times. And there are a lot of witchcraft traditions that are very led by agency as well. It's just that you'll make the decisions together as a group about what you do. But it does not mean that agency is bypassed. Witchcraft and agency are bedfellows. They are like coffee and fucking cream. They go together. When you're dealing with trauma, very often you will tell yourself stories like, I have no power. I can't protect myself. Nothing I do matters. I don't know where I belong in this world, right? These are really, really difficult, deep stories that go into you because of trauma. Witchcraft is fundamentally, at its core, a practice that involves a lot of intentional actions and therefore a lot of sovereignty. You decide when you're going to cast a spell, when you're going to do a ritual, when you're going to do a reading about something. You set energetic boundaries, you cleanse your auric field, you decide what you're going to pursue in terms of study and in terms of certifications. So there's lots of agency there, and that can be so unbelievably healing for somebody who feels that their traumatic event left them with no sense of agency and no power. You are repeatedly reinforcing through the practice of witchcraft that you are here, that you matter, that you have power, that you get to make decisions, and that it is safe to do so. Witches have all kinds of different beliefs about magic. We don't all believe the same kinds of things. We don't all have the same kind of structure in our path. But even just the act, the symbolic act of choosing what to do, gathering up your energy and your intention and doing it, of course, that's going to be nurturing for people with trauma. Naturally, that has a really positive effect for a great many people. Another thing that can be super positive when you have trauma and you practice witchcraft is that witchcraft really helps you build a worldview and a sense of what is going on and why it's going on. Now, obviously, there are existential freakouts in witchcraft, just as there is with any other kind of spiritual path. I think most intelligent people who feel and think and are involved in the business of living are going to have an existential freak out from time to time. But trauma very often shatters the worldview and completely sometimes shatters the sense of self. So when you're dealing with trauma, you might be asking yourself stuff like, what is the point? Who even am I? What kind of sense can I make of anything anymore? Witchcraft has all of the delicious archetypal materials and all of the symbolic goodness to be able to help you create a framework that holds those questions and holds your experiences of worrying about things like that, worrying about stuff like, how do I move forward? Who am I? What is this even all about? Why did this happen? How can I understand this, right? Those are huge questions. And very often you grapple with them alone. And when you do share them with people, often they don't know what to say, especially if they've never been through anything like the thing that you've survived. And so witchcraft actually has a lot of that very deep, intense and rich material that helps you to hold your traumatic experiences and the questions that naturally come to you afterwards onwards. So for example, you might see traumas around loss and suffering as part of the life-death life cycle, or you might look into archetypes or gods or whatever that are to do with suffering or to do with rebirth or to do with loss or to do with transformation. All of that stuff is there. There's so much there that you can lean into that helps you to further kind of understand and make sense of things. And you might learn about how people made sense of that stuff thousands of years ago in big pagan civilizations. This is very helpful for a lot of witches. You might understand your journey of healing as a journey of ordeal, a journey of spiritual ordeal, an initiatory process, a process of skin shedding, shape shifting, relearning who you are, evolving, alchemy. All of these things are like steeped into the roots of witchcraft, and you can read about all that stuff and you can design rituals around all that kind of stuff. And there are other witches that you can have conversations with about it. Working with myths and archetypes and folklore and fairy tale and dream work and visualization and astral stuff, all of those things can help you to create context and frameworks for the things that you're going through to feel less alone. It's really incredible. After the very, very worst news I ever received in my life in 2022, one of the first things that brought me comfort, and I talked about it in the video, some of you guys will remember it, one of the very first things that brought me comfort on any kind of cognitive level was the myth of Hel and Balder in the Norse tradition. That's what I mean by witches are working with a lot of rich material. We're not just working with the, grit your teeth and bear it, white knuckle ride when it comes to trauma. We have a lot of other shit to look at that helps to stabilize us and situate us in where we're going to be thinking about the situation, where we're going to be coming from with it. Of course, these frameworks don't erase pain. They don't erase pain, but they help you to think about it differently. That is for sure. They bolster you in the face of it. That is for fucking definite. Witchcraft also does a lot to encourage very active participation in your own healing. A lot of people that are dealing with trauma feel weak, they feel powerless, they feel helpless, they feel like they couldn't do anything about what happened to them, and they sort of carry that with them in their body and in their stories that they tell themselves about who they are and what they can do. And with a practice like witchcraft, there's so much movement towards active participation in your understanding, in your healing, and in your thriving, that I think that on its own does a lot to nurture somebody with trauma. So you engage in ritual, you engage in spellcraft, you engage in divination, journaling, shadow work, visualization, working with the gods, right? All of these things are things that you choose to actively engage in, and that can give you back a great deal of a sense of power and sovereignty. It's really hard when you feel like you just have to be a passive recipient of whatever passing shred of comfort or understanding might come across you, and you feel like it's not enough, and you feel like there's nothing that you can do to help it to enter, whereas witchcraft is just chock full of stuff that you can do to feel engaged and to participate fully in your journey from the point of trauma onwards. Another thing that is really beautiful about witchcraft in relation to dealing with trauma is that witchcraft gives you a lot of opportunities to symbolically express what you're going through. There are so many people that are dealing with trauma who find it impossible, really hard or impossible to express what they feel about it in language. It's really hard to get the words out. It's really hard to feel like you even can make sense externally of what you've gone through in any form of expression. So witchcraft gives you so much more to play with, right? You can burn a letter. You can design a talisman and wear it to represent something. You can get a box and put something inside it and wrap it up. You can do poppet work. You can do candle work where you inscribe things into the candle and then burn it. Everything is symbolically suggesting what it is you want to have happen. There are so many opportunities to do something symbolically and attach your feeling to it and attach meaning to it and know that that meaning is really, really sharp and potent. And you didn't have to sit there and write a massive essay about what you went through. You didn't even have to get another human being to understand it. You used the language of symbolism. Witches are always looking to become more and more fluent in the language of symbolism. And it's one of the reasons that I love talking to witches so fucking much, because they're on that gravy train with me.
You're on a gravy train with biscuit wheels.
Symbolism excites me. Sigils excite me. The idea that something could mean something else, interpreting things, getting those signs, getting those synchronicities, being really conscious about things like spell design and ritual design, like what am I going to choose and why? Which colors am I going to choose? What kind of shapes do I want? What playlist do I want? All of that stuff is me saying to myself, okay, what is going to symbolically make this pop? Like, how can I take how I'm feeling inside, or what my desire is inside, or my fear, and how can I put it in a symbolic language? There's such an intimacy with yourself and with the craft when you do that. And nobody else needed to come to the function to reassure you of that. It's your opportunity to build a symbolic language for yourself. Symbolic actions can really allow you to get catharsis around massive emotional content, like a lot more sometimes than intellectualizing it will do. If you've been listening to me talking so far and you're thinking, okay, I'm on board, let's do this, it sounds like a plan, then this part of the video is really important. I want to talk about some mindsets that it's very, very useful to go into witchcraft with when you're using it as a container for trauma, when you're using it for trauma healing, any of that stuff. The first thing that I want to say is don't look for a quick fix and try not to look for anything linear, right? Healing is not a straight line. Accepting, releasing, moving on, integrating trauma into your sense of self and finding kind of like a less overwhelming and less hijacking place for it. All of that is not a linear journey by any means, right? I always say that it's the difference between an on-off light switch and a dimmer switch. When you're dealing with trauma and the healing and the adjustment after that, it is a dimmer switch. You're going to go up by a certain percent, but then something will happen that will take you a bit down. You'll go up and down. It's not just like, oh yeah, I clicked on the light and now I'm done and I never need to think about this again. So try not to burden your witchcraft practice with loads of just like really overblown expectations, right? Manage your expectations around witchcraft and it will serve you best. And just don't expect one ritual or one spell or one reading or one spiritual peak experience to do the whole kit and caboodle for you, because that's not how it's going to go down. And if you start with those expectations, it's definitely safer and it's definitely a more useful, positive journey. Another thing that I want to suggest is that you check in with your perception of your trauma and who you are as a person with trauma, because the last thing that you want to do is come into witchcraft with all of these great plans to help you deal with it, integrate it, move through it, right? But you're thinking about how your trauma has made you broken, or it's made you dirty, or you need to purify yourself in some way, or you need to raise your vibration above the trauma. Try and look at the language that you're using and the coding that you're using with your own trauma and who you are as someone who deals with it. Because if you're trying to use witchcraft to like cleanse and purify yourself of the filth or the shame or the anger or the rage, you know, if you're thinking about it in terms of like, I need to get clean and I need to rise above and I need to remake myself because I'm broken or I'm wrong in some way, then you might actually start to use your witchcraft as a very punitive, like self-punishing kind of practice. And I feel like that's definitely the arse backwards way to go into this completely. Everything will deserve attention. Your anger, your grief, your vulnerability, your fear, your sorrow, your bitterness, your resentment, like all of those pieces are parts of the puzzle. And there are different practices and different sort of ideas within witchcraft that can hold all of that. Try not to shame yourself out of any specific emotions. And certainly, like I said, try not to think of yourself as cleaning your soul or cleaning your body or any of that kind of stuff. Let witchcraft be something that allows you to consider how you can integrate the fact that this happened and how you can claim your sovereignty in the face of it, claim your power, think of yourself as someone that survived and is now insisting on being someone who will thrive. Another thing I want to mention is that the goal of working with your trauma in witchcraft has always got to be integration and not erasure. Like, obviously, it would be wonderful if we could just go to that guy in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and just get the memory of the entire fucking thing erased. Believe me, I've fantasized about all that kind of thing myself, and I would love to be able to do it for myself and others, but we know that that is not how this is going to work. Fighting the existence of your trauma in your body and your mind can actually cause an additional trauma. I truly, truly believe that. I believe that many secondary traumas are caused by this idea that, like, I have to just get it out of my mind. I have to get it away from me. I never want to think about it again. And I just feel like that causes so much more suffering. I would never ever press somebody to use witchcraft for their trauma, to talk about their trauma, to go into therapy around their trauma if they don't feel like they're ready to do that. But what I would hope that somebody could do is start to move towards readiness to accept certain tools and to acknowledge that, yes, there has been hurt and yes, it's been devastating, but they can take sovereignty into their hands, acknowledge that it happened, and go through that integration process, right? What we don't want to use witchcraft for is just to wipe the slate clean and to never have to think about it again or feel into it again. We never have any triggers, you know? I just feel like witchcraft can do so much good and there is so much magic in it. But I also believe that witchcraft is something that is complementary to reality. It's complementary to it. I don't want to use witchcraft to do anything that's against the laws of physics. And I don't want to use witchcraft to do anything that is against the human mind. And I believe it's against the human mind to shoot for erasure in, you know, at the end of trauma. It just is. Erasure as in forgetting, not erasure as in the band. We should always shoot for the inclusion of Erasure the band. What a fucking great band. Witchcraft can help you to learn to carry your story instead of having your story imprison you. That is the point of it. It's not to erase, it is to integrate. It is to have that sense that it's a part of you as opposed to you just being dragged along behind it. Another best practice that it's really important that I mention is that safety and stability comes before the alchemy and the transformation. It is very, very tempting. And I know I have fucking been there. It is very tempting to shoot for the biggest and most complex and most intense and most overwhelming ritual that includes all the content and all the feelings and everything, because you want a big result. You want a big bang. But actually, you've got to focus on things like your grounding, your breathing, your sense of safety, the sort of timeline, the pacing at which you want to unpack these devastating things that have happened in your life. A nervous system that feels safe and feels like there is a measured journey is way more important than shooting for a really, really quick, immense breakthrough. Trust me on that. That's a very important piece of safety advice. So what kind of magical techniques and witchcraft practices are available to you if you want to use the craft to help you with trauma? This could be a video series all on its own. This could be a 150,000 word book, guys. I'm never going to get everything in there. I'm going to talk about a few things that I know that a lot of my clients have used and that seem to be quite popular with traumatized witches. I'm going to talk about things I find particularly valuable. So let's get into it, okay? First of all, a lot of you know I am big on the somatic piece. I'm big on body work. I'm really big, yes, on the, you know, energy field stuff, right? Clearing your energy field, connecting with your aura. I'm very big on that, but I'm also big on things like, you know, just alignment with the body. How does it feel? What's going on inside of it? Where is the pain stored? Where is the tension stored? I'm really big on having a movement routine for catharsis and for feeling embodied. That kind of stuff is really incredible for certain types of trauma. Think of your body as a magical instrument. It is the very thing that allows you to do any witchcraft in the first place. Being here, having a human body is the only thing connecting you truly to the human experience, right? Like it's the only thing allowing you to do what you're doing right now, watching this and taking on this advice. So try not to feel like witchcraft doesn't have anything to do with the body. The body is integral to the plot. Now, depending on what your trauma is about, you're going to have different ways into this kind of advice, and it's going to go further for some of you than it will for others of you. I know that every single individual person watching this has a different experience and different needs. But I'm just saying, don't think of the body work and the somatic journey as different from the witchcraft. Bring it in, make it part of the witchcraft. Protection work in particular is really good for people that are dealing with triggers and symptoms associated with trauma, because trauma will very, very often make you feel that you are not safe, that you cannot just breathe out and relax. You can't drop your shoulders. There's a lot of hypervigilance. There's a lot of paranoia. There's all those kinds of feelings. So protection work really puts you back in touch with that idea of establishing your safety and feeling like there are spaces, sacred spaces, where you can be safe and have a moment with yourself and recalibrate and be with yourself and nurture yourself. So you might want to do protection jars. You might want to make protection sigils. You might want to walk through consecrated incense in order to protect your aura. You also might have relationships with deities or beings that feel incredibly protective, and that's wonderful. I want to talk about ancestor veneration and ancestor work, but also about generational cycle breaking, because I think those two things overlap when it comes to trauma work for a lot of witches. When you venerate your ancestors or work with your ancestors or anything like that, if you also have very dysfunctional or negative family patterns, you might find that those two things overlap. If that is where your trauma comes from, then there are a great many breakthroughs and a great many discoveries that can be made when you put your cycle breaking work in alignment with your ancestor work. Now, ancestor work on its own can be incredibly protective and nurturing and everything else, but I'm just saying, I have spoken to witches, and some of you will be watching this right now, and you blew my mind, okay? I've had incredible conversations, which I would never repeat or divulge, but just the most incredible things witches have said to me about how they've done ancestor work, and it's actually helped them to unpick certain stitches, and they've done family healing for previous generations and just things of that nature. Like, it's really, really very heady and incredible, and I just find that so fucking moving. You can explore family patterns through doing ancestor work and cycle breaking work. You can, reaffirm that you are not just your family line and your family patterns, that you can take the strength from what came before you, but you don't have to take the negativity or the dysfunction with you. So you're doing rituals of release, you're doing cord cuttings, but you're also doing reunification ritual. It can go in so many directions. It could get really intergenerational for you. It really depends what your trauma is about. But if it's family shit, then be prepared. There's a lot of stuff in witchcraft that can assist you with that. Grief rituals are a really good one. Funeral rituals, the lighting of candles, commemoration rituals, crying in sacred space, reading out certain things like memorandums and stuff like that. Is that the right word? Where you're reading addresses to those who have passed over. You're grieving old versions of yourself. You're grieving the life that you planned to have before you had the trauma. Grief work is something that can be very safely held in witchcraft quite often. People have seasonal remembrance ceremonies and deathversaries and all kinds of things, People have sobriety ceremonies to celebrate the amount of years that they've been sober. Like, all these kinds of things, I think, are part of honoring, they're part of commemoration, they're part of grief, and they're part of recognizing the journey that you've been on and honoring yourself. It's self-honoring to do these kinds of things. Write letters, burn letters, say goodbye to things, acknowledge that something has gone and you want something else to come in. Obviously, I'm going to mention shadow work in relationship to trauma if there is any suppressed anger or suppressed rage, or things like fear, shame, unmet needs, all kinds of stories you tell about yourself because of your trauma, and unpacking that, looking at that, confronting that. Everybody's mileage varies when it comes to shadow work and how much you want to implement that into your practice, but I am somebody that likes to go on and on and on about shadow work, and I have done for many years, so you can find a complete playlist of everything I have to say about that subject. Cord cutting is really, really powerful. It's a really powerful part of how we stop the trauma from having so much of a direct energetic effect on us. You can cut cords from trauma itself. We don't just cut cords from people. We cut cords from phases of our lives. We cut cords from memories and conversations. And it doesn't mean that we never think about them again. We're cutting the energetic power that those things have over us. That can be so powerful for people with trauma. You can actually even cut cords with some of the stories that you've been telling yourself about who you are or what you deserve or where your life could possibly go because of your trauma. So you cut cords with the old stories so you can write more fulfilling stories. Rituals of reclaiming are also so powerful in witchcraft. Reclaiming your joy, reclaiming your sense of purpose, reclaiming your independence, reclaiming your body. You can invite your playfulness back into your life. You can invite your carefree nature back into your life. You can bring parts of yourself home that have been in exile or have been suffering. Maybe it's the age that you were when the trauma occurred. I know for a lot of people, they do work with the younger versions of themselves within a witchcraft context, so they can invite those parts home and have a dialogue with them again. So much power, so much potency. I could go on and on and on about what is available. I hope that's given you a little kind of buffet of what is available, and I would love you to share in the comments what kinds of techniques have you used in witchcraft to help you deal with trauma. You do not have to share about the specifics of your trauma if you don't want to. Of course you can if you want to. There's no such thing as oversharing. When I'm asking for details like that, I'm asking, okay? So if you want to share fully, you can. But if you just want to talk about some of the best formats and the best techniques you found, what you really enjoy to do, I would love to know. In my second book, Witch in Darkness, there's a lot in there about using witchcraft in relation to trauma and pain. That's what the whole book is basically about, okay? And in that that book, I do mention that witchcraft is a complementary part of a larger toolkit. 9 times out of 10, people are going to tell you that. Witches are going to tell you that. They're going to tell you that they also have a journaling practice. They also have a creative practice. They attend community therapy or a community group, a support group, something like that. They do gardening. They do volunteering. They're in a book club. They're doing other things in other ways to heal and to get back out there into the world again. Of course, many witches that use the craft to deal with their trauma are also actively in therapy. And this is something that I would never discourage. This is something that I always think is a really nice compliment. And actually, a lot of my clients have a therapist and they also have me, and they call me something like their woo-woo woman, or like there's the spiritual one. I've got the counselor, and then I've got the spiritual counselor.
It's like, who's the most famous person you've life coached?
I would probably have to say... Think of someone famous. The Queen. Interesting choice.
And there's a lot of complementary work that I've done with therapists all over the world that I will never meet, because a client will come to me and say, oh, I told my therapist about what you said, and she said I could implement it this way. And, you know, like, I will ask, well, what did your therapist say? Let's have a look at what was said in therapy and see if we can complement it with witchcraft. So I'm always trying to respect what a witch is going through in therapy when they come to me as a client. And very often it's so lovely to know that their therapist also respects what we're doing together, and there's an openness there. So I feel like I'm holding one hand and the therapist is holding the other hand, and that's just so lovely to be able to feel that that's happening with clients sometimes. Basic nervous system regulation is really important. Looking at things like nutrition, hydration, your sleep cycle, that kind of thing, your breathing, conscious breathing, you know, making sure if you have a lot of shallow breathing or anything like that, if you tend to be quite disembodied as a result of your traumatic experiences, it's really working on that stuff. It's getting the self-care in. It's just making sure that you are giving yourself time, love, attention, and support. You've got the movement routine, you've got the sensory regulation, right? So all of that is a factor. You've also just got time spent with people that you love and who care about you. Doesn't even have to necessarily be talking about the trauma. It can just be making nice memories, doing things that you deserve to enjoy in this lifetime can be something that you're doing outside of witchcraft. We don't need to put all of the, witchcraft doesn't have to carry all the water, baby. We can definitely have other things in the kit as well. A lot of witches read a lot of books to help them with whatever particular symptoms come up because of their trauma, or looking at the style of trauma. For example, if you have complex trauma from childhood, then maybe you want to read books about that. You want to watch videos about that. You want to work with somebody who understands about that, right? You want to do your own research, and you want to collect together everything from different sources that feels like it's going to be useful. Of course, you might try a lot of these techniques and exercises when you're in sacred space, or you might ask your deities to be present while you're trying these techniques. So you're always fusing your witchcraft with everything else, rather than feeling like it's got to be doing it with witchcraft or doing it via other means. It's not that. These things are complementary. They dance really well together. All right, my darlings, let's do the safety bit now. I really want to talk about certain things that I think I would just be irresponsible not to talk about when it comes to this stuff. Stay within your windows of tolerance. Witchcraft has so many incredible things in it for you, but it can also be very intense. Like I said earlier in the video, we can also just end up trying to shoot for way too much too soon. If you know that engaging with your trauma leaves you feeling panicked, dissociated, sometimes frozen, unable to function afterwards, very fearful, any of that stuff, then you have to navigate witchcraft accordingly. Always navigate it within your window of tolerance. Always bite off too little. Always risk biting off too little in witchcraft work rather than risk biting off too much. You can always come back and do more and do more and build it up. You don't need to pull out the fucking big guns right away because you're feeling overly ambitious, or you just want all of your problems gone straight away, because then you risk going outside of your window of tolerance and you end up really sort of messing with yourself. And then witchcraft becomes the enemy. Then witchcraft becomes something that led you to that, when actually it was very often your decisions about how much you wanted to do and in what measure of time that made that happen. I've been teaching shadow work for a really long time, and this is something with shadow work that I say to people often is like, look, it's better to pull off too little meat and then go back than it is to be like, I'm going to eat the whole fucking thing and just see what happens. Like, that can often be obviously destabilizing. It can be dangerous. Healing work is challenging. Confronting trauma is challenging, but it doesn't need to be dangerous and overwhelming and so intense that you find that like you're newly traumatized again from what you tried to do with your trauma in the practice of witchcraft. So just figure out what is your window of tolerance and make sure that you feel comfortable with what you're doing. After you've addressed your trauma in witchcraft in any way, don't forget about the power of grounding. Don't forget about going for a little walk, you know, figuratively or literally touching grass, drinking some water, getting under a weighted blanket, doing some breath exercises, having something to eat, touching a satisfying physical object. I know for me, I can never resist a stone. Like every time I go to Brighton Beach, because I'm in Brighton quite often, every time I go to Brighton Beach, there's just the most satisfying stones with all these little bits for the thumb and the fingers and the palm, and everywhere you turn it, there just seems to be a nice thing to hold. And so I always end up picking up stones. I've literally got a bag of stones on the bed right now that are various ones that I've picked up because it's like, oh, that's a nice companion stone for grounding, right? That is a grounding practice. Energizing the senses and coming back into the body just really, really helps you to get nice and on the ground again after something like ritual or a really intense reading or really intense communion with a god about your trauma. Anything you're doing, ground afterwards. It's so useful to do that. Don't try and force memories. I think this is something important, right? When you watch archaeologists excavating a site, have you ever seen any of them just bring a fucking digger in and like get the damn thing that, well, actually, quite a lot of colonial British excavation definitely happened that way.
I mean, I killed 15 of those buggers, sir. Now at home, they'd hang me. Here, they'll give me a fucking medal, sir.
But I'm talking about the real shit, okay, where the scientists come in and you literally see them with brushes, like gently moving the earth aside, trying to preserve everything as gently as possible. Slowly, the secrets become apparent and you see the walls of an old Roman thing, but it doesn't happen quickly. It does not happen with the quickness, and neither will your excavation of your memories around the trauma, how you felt at the time, or any of that stuff. Try to respect the slow pacing of the thing. Trust what needs attention and trust that things are going to emerge in their own time. Trust the technology of witchcraft as well to be able to help you to observe that and to flow with it. Be very careful when it comes to communicating with like deities and spirits and ancestors and things like this. I am not trying to fearmonger. This is not a fear-mongering thing. I fucking hate the way some witches with platforms do everybody the disservice of endlessly fear-mongering about talking with disembodied intelligences. I have a whole video on that. I'll leave it for you down below if you want to watch it. So I don't like that. But I will say something, okay? People that carry trauma can sometimes misinterpret various things that come through, or because of their very, very strong narrative of shame or lack of worth, they might end up kind of like just projecting those stories onto beings. So when you get a communication from a being, just ask yourself, is this advice compassionate? Does it seem to fit with my story? Is it cruel? Is it punitive? Does it actually just reflect and mirror the worst parts of what I think of myself because of my trauma? And if so, is that actually me saying that to me? Is that actually an omnipresent, omnipotent being with my best interests in mind? Or is that me being a little shitbag to myself because the trauma has left me with a complete lack of worth? Deities give banging spiritual guidance, and banging spiritual guidance does not encourage things like self-isolation, fucking beating yourself up, doing anything that makes you feel unsafe or further ashamed. So if you are getting guidance from a being that is doing that, like literally protection, shove them out the window, get rid, and acknowledge that actually maybe that kind of thing is just really a mirror of what is going on inside of you. Don't listen to it. If you know that it is not the kind of advice you would ever give to anyone that you love, don't take it from any kind of disembodied intelligence, whether it is metaphysically real or whether it has been just conjured up by your trauma. Finally, my darlings, I just want to talk a little bit about the dangers and the limitations with using witchcraft for trauma so that you can observe these things and check when they're coming up. Again, I'm not trying to fearmonger. I just feel like it would be irresponsible of me not to talk about these things. So first of all, spiritual bypassing is definitely a thing that can happen when you pursue spiritual practices to help you with trauma. The spiritual bypassing part is basically where you're maybe not accessing witchcraft as you could be. You are instead using it to kind of like paper over what's going on, you know? Only you can decide really if you're spiritual bypassing when it comes to your own trauma, but it's usually just using the shiny paraphernalia and the joy of witchcraft to avoid really feeling your emotions, really taking accountability for what happens next. And that can come up in a number of ways, right? Like, you could maybe do something fluffy and aesthetic and surface level, but never ever really get to like the grieving or the hard stuff or anything. And that's fine. You might not want to, but presuming as you're watching this video, you know, that you want to use witchcraft to help you deal with your trauma, just be aware that there is a certain pocket that you can fall into where you're just kind of using witchcraft to paper over everything that's going wrong, or reassuring yourself of everything that you want to think and believe, and actually not going into the business of self-discovery and understanding what tools you can use. Basically, healing requires feeling, you know, and if you don't want to feel anything, witchcraft will give you endless distractions, darling, endless fairground rides so that you don't have to feel anything. I'm going to quote Carl Jung now, please excuse me. Forgive me, darlings, but Carl Jung said there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And I really like that quote. It really sort of strikes me as something that is true. And like I said, we have to do that in a paced way. We have to use witchcraft as a complement to other things. We have to constantly be building our toolkit. But for me, like, I know healing and integrating is fucking hard, right? There is an element of it that is hard. So I definitely can go into distraction for sure. Like, somebody left a comment actually under my Bad Habits of Tarot Readers video saying that whenever they really need to do a reading on something that is a problem for them and they need to deal with it, they end up doing a reading about something else that is fluffier and nicer and more exciting. And then they're like, that's not what you should have done a reading on. You know you've got shit to sort out.
There's two types of people in this world, pal. People who know they've got shit to sort out and people who don't know they've got shit to sort out.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Word out. Truth up, dude. Truth.
And I read that comment and I just laughed because I was like, I've been there. I've fucking done that. I've got the t-shirt, the key ring, the souvenir photo. I have so sat down with my cards and been like, right, I really need to look at what's going on. I need to look at this. And then instead I've been like, why don't I just do a juicy little reading about this instead? It will be really exciting. Why don't I do a reading about how to have the best weekend at this party that I'm going to? And it's like, Kellyanne, what the fuck are you doing, babe? Come on, get with the program. There is definitely a danger of obsessive self-analysis, and there is a danger of getting stuck inside things like shadow work. Honestly, this is something that comes up for a lot of witches that are into my kind of content and messaging, because you guys that watch me, you are very deep thinkers, very deep feelers. You are excavators. You are explorers. You want to understand. You are cycle breakers. You are so fucking radical in your outlook towards this stuff. And that can actually lead to overtly obsessing over every single thing and just ending up never taking a break from it. Just remember that you can be living, loving, laughing, and having a great time at the same time as you're also processing, healing, confronting, feeling your feelings. You know, we can be doing both. We don't need to go so far down the rabbit hole into shadow or into trauma processing that it becomes something that we become fixated on. It really fucks with your mood. I actually think every single time we deal with our trauma in witchcraft, we should then do something really fun and fluffy and awesome, you know, as a reward. Like, binge that new Netflix series, talk on the phone with somebody, do some crochet.
3 words for you. Treat yourself. Treat yourself 2011.
I think it's really about that. It's about saying, okay, now I need something else, you know, and mixing it up. Try not to get so invested that you're like, I have to get to the fucking bottom of this. And it's like a, you know, it's like a great big, you know, map on the wall, you know, like those programs you watch where the police are trying to solve a mob crime and you've got all the mobsters and all these strings between them. And that is literally what some witches can end up like when they're trying to really excavate and really understand, and it's not worth it. Don't end up doing that. I did mention this a little bit earlier, but I want to touch on it again. Just choosing practices that are way over the top. Re-traumatization can happen through choosing really extreme practices. If you choose practices that involve things like sleep deprivation, fasting, really aggressive shadow work, stuff of that nature, overwhelming ritual experiences where you're just biting off way more than you can chew, like that's just something that you do need to look out for. I want to state that again. Also, magic works best when it's paired with real world actions. Magic works best when it is respected as part of a process where other things have to take place as well. So like I said earlier, don't put too many expectations on witchcraft. Don't feel that you can just do a spell and then not take any worldly action. Don't feel that you can just explore something in sacred space and then take none of your discoveries about it out into the world with you to put into practice to help you deal with your trauma. Also, just try not to misinterpret your trauma responses with your intuition. And this is a journey for everybody, but we all know that when you're dealing with trauma, you can be hypervigilant, you can be overtly suspicious, you can catastrophize, you can have a lot of unnecessary or misplaced fear, find it hard to trust others, you find it hard to trust yourself. Try not to make that too mystical in nature. When that kind of thing comes up, don't immediately think to yourself, oh, that's a message from the gods. Oh my God, I'm sensing that. And that must mean that that's a thing. Listen, if you've got trauma, you know that you've got cognitive distortions from that trauma. So just stop for a moment before you decide that that's a message from the gods themselves. Just stop for a moment and be like, hang on a sec, I have trauma, so I also do have cognitive distortions. Let me take a breather. Let me have a little moment with myself. Let me recalibrate. Let me see what is happening that might either back up or disprove the thing that I'm thinking. Please do that before you decide, like, that is the gods telling me to break up with this person or leave this situation. Like, we all know trauma makes us like a horse that's about to bolt in certain situations. So just know that that might not be anything mystical. That might actually be something from your trauma. Okay, just give yourself a fucking minute before you set anything in stone. Darlings, witchcraft offers a magnitude of different wonderful, wonderful things to help us to move through trauma, to understand and integrate it, and to thrive beyond it. And I hope I have managed to put that across to you in this video. But also, yes, it does have its dangers, it does have its limitations. It is not a replacement for trauma-informed therapy. It's not a replacement for supportive human relationships, you know? So it really is about that complementary thing that I was talking about earlier. Please keep that in mind. But you are always going to meet witches and speak to witches who are going to say to you, I had witchcraft when there was nothing else. In the acknowledgements of my second book, Witch in Darkness, I actually said that I wrote the book for every single witch who stared into a candle flame in the darkness when there was nothing else. And I really meant that. There have been certain points in my life where that was it and that was all. It was witchcraft. I was down to the fucking bone and it saved me. It did. But it doesn't need to be like that all the time, okay? Witchcraft does not have to be the only thing that is in your life. Like, put it in a toolkit and enjoy it as part of a toolkit. The spell, the therapy session, the journaling session, the healing conversation with a friend, the really good sleep, the really good meal, exploring a new place, you know, seeing some art, like really moving your body, enjoying the sun, right? All of those things are in the exact same toolkit. They all relate to each other. They're all speaking to each other and they're all there to help you with your surviving and thriving. Thank you so much for watching this. If you want to work with me one-to-one, you know where I am. The website is always down below. So come over and take a look at my services. Also check out the Patreon, darlings. And I'm so glad that I could be of service to you with this video today. I am running a workshop. It's taking place on the 9th of August. It's called Witch Against Time. So I will also leave that down below with all of the details. I can't wait to see what you have to say in the comments. Thank you so much for being a part of this and for allowing me to express myself around this topic. I hope it's been helpful. Much love, blessed healing, and blessed be. Mwah.